So if you've already read my book, you'll know who Caroline is. And if you haven't read it yet, you'll soon encounter her as a character. So let's begin with origins. Why did you start the shift? Walk us through that decision.
I started the shift 3 weeks after Daphne Caruana Galizia was assassinated. The drive was that I felt, we couldn't wake up the next day as journalists and continue business as usual. I felt that we needed to send a message to the perpetrators that even if you kill the journalist, you will not kill the story. That is the best defense that we have as journalists in terms of protecting ourselves. We have since, in the last 7 years, continued her investigations. One of them, for example, was the scandalous deal on the public hospitals. We are now at a point where our investigations led to the opposition filing a court case and the court deciding that the hospitals must be returned to the public because it was a fraudulent deal. It was not a deal in the public interest. It was a deal that was designed to line the politicians' pockets. Then there's another story then that is the energy deal, which is what she was killed for. We are not there yet on that. These are investigations that continue. It is our mission to make sure that all that she started in terms of the major investigations are concluded. We're getting there. It's a long path.
There must have been a personal element as well to this too, right? Like you knew Daphne. How did you first come into contact with her?
Daphne contacted me when I did my first investigation for the Times of Malta. I didn't even have her number. She called on a Sunday morning. And I said, oh my God, this is another minister calling to scream his head off, which used to happen every Sunday morning with the Sunday Times. And she said, hello, Caroline, I'm Daphne. I said, oh my God, I must have got something wrong. It's Daphne. That's the first time we spoke. And she just said, I just wanted to congratulate you for a good investigation. Do you know who you're dealing with? I said, yes, of course, I've done my research. She said, they're connected. This is the family. They're connected to this murder and that other scandal and whatever. I said, I know. She said, now I respect you even more because you did it despite knowing that. And few journalists in Malta do. And a friendship started to develop after that. We started to have lunches. We started to talk and, vent with each other about the problems we constantly face. The week she was killed, she sent me a message and she said, I have a sense of that time is running out. I didn't quite understand it. And I said, okay, I thought she was, referring to, we're getting older and, things are more difficult and this. So we arranged to have a lunch the following week. We never had that lunch because she was killed a few days later in a car bomb.
Yeah, that story always stuck with me. That's one of the things that motivated me to keep writing about all of this. I can relate to that same feeling too of I came into contact with Daphne just by email because she found an old article that I'd written 3 years before, and I logged in for my morning read, and there it was plastered across her website, and I just thought, oh shit, like what did I what did I get wrong, what
But
did I miss? But
that's how I found you. And you wrote, and I'm really appreciative of the articles you have written for the shift. I saw that article. She had this keen sense. She had this, gut instinct about people, and she could connect the dots with in terms of investigations far sooner than any of us could. So well, that was a good thing, I think, that came out of in the aftermath.
yeah, so I was always so impressed with her instinct in that's what made me into a daily reader for all those years. It kind of helped me sort out all the things I didn't understand about the world I was living in. But also her, I really admired her writing style. Just she had such a clean writing style, so directed, but also she did sarcasm so well. Like she was so good at skewering these arrogant, bloated politicians who and knocking them down a peg when they badly needed it. And I think that's using that kind of humor can people took it in mixed ways, but it's when you skewer somebody like that, I think it and show them for what they are, it makes other people, I think, a little bit less afraid of them. It shows that these are not people to be afraid of necessarily. These people are just are are beneath contempt for the things that they're getting away with.
Yeah, my personal feeling is that she was killed not only about what she was about to reveal, not only for what she was about to reveal. She was killed because she was a thorn, and they couldn't cope with her. The first investigation we did with the shift after her assassination was to investigate the Facebook hate groups, and they were hate groups set up by the party in government, administered by people in government, that continued to build this machine that depicted her as a witch, and all the vocabulary that is reserved for women. What was absolutely really, really difficult to digest was that when we entered these groups, because they were secret groups, and you had to have a membership with the party in government to be able to access them. So we had whistleblowers who let us in. But what was really shocking when we joined was the fact that they were celebrating her murder. They were celebrating it, wine
And this is
glass.
not just hours later, like within immediately.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And there were comments like, she can't even be buried. She's in bits and pieces, good for her, this kind of thing. And these are people who probably never even read an article that she wrote. This was a hate campaign that was created by the party that is now in government. We've had a public inquiry that said that the state is responsible for her assassination, and yet nothing has been done.
Yeah, that's the of all the investigations you did and just the shocking levels of corruption you uncovered, that's the one that's shocked me most, I think. And I referenced that those hate groups very early in the first like 2 pages of my book, I think. And so anybody who's interested in looking this up for themselves can go to the shift and you can see these stories. They're still online. Really recommend that you do because you've captured images, memes that they were sharing. It's unbelievable. So what's it like then doing investigative journalism in Malta, especially after Daphne was killed for doing exactly this sort of work?
Well, it's certainly not been easy, and it still continues. Um, I understand I used to work for the Times of Malta, so when I used to meet Daphne, I didn't quite understand the fuss that she was making about being isolated and all this, and women journalists, and I used to tell her, "Come on, Daphne, I'm a woman, and I'm leading the biggest media organization in the country, so it can't be that bad." I never got any favors or anything like that, so I did it out of my own steam, So, but when I launched the shift, I understood exactly what she meant, because then you're not protected by an institution that the government needs to deliver its own messages. So we have been swimming against the current, facing threats. We 2 years ago, I had 40 cases launched against me by the government, while the justice minister was in Brussels saying, "Oh, we are at the forefront of anti-SLAPP legislation. SLAPPs are lawsuits that are they're vexatious lawsuits that are intended to cripple a newsroom or an individual financially." So I had 40 cases launched against me within a week.
But we should say too that these 40 cases were designed to kill the story that you were trying to find out how much money they paid to basically a government propagandist who poses as an independent journalist. And each of these departments sued you separately for trying to find out the same thing. How much did each of them pay these guys?
Yes, yes. It's been 2 years now, and we've won every single case so far because it's still ongoing. But obviously, it diverted our resources. We are a community-funded newsroom, so it diverted our resources to dealing with these cases. It stalled our growth inevitably, but we're still fighting.
And you should be said too that if you don't fight these cases, you lose automatically, right? Like you're forced to see these guys in court and put up your own legal fees, and they have the resources of an entire taxpayer base to draw on in order
Yes,
to fight one small newsroom.
they launched some 80 lawyers against us. 80 lawyers against us, an individual. I keep saying us, but they were actually against me. But you know, the Shift is my organization, and it's been incredibly difficult to survive all of this. I don't like bullies, so I tend
Hmm.
to continue fighting.
And it's not just the fact that you're under this constant pressure from the government and have no larger institution backing you, but I mean, there's also a social pressure. Like I went for dinner with you in Gozo, and I remember the feeling of walking into a restaurant. You see these heads turning, and then they know your face by now, and it's pretty uncomfortable just in such a small place where you know the people that you're writing about, or they might be related to the person you're sitting across at the next table from at dinner. That's
Yes,
not easy.
I don't have much of a social life. I don't find it very comfortable. If I do go out, I tend to speak in hushed tones because I know my voice carries, so it's a problem. Um, yeah, it's not easy.
So you mentioned being community funded. So how have you avoided being compromised by government funding, like pretty much everyone else? And you should say something, please, about how the media works in Malta, like state capture and party control. That's quite unique.
Okay, so the media landscape in Malta is made up is dominated by the party in government, whichever party is in government. So both political parties have their own media, um, TV, radio, online, whatever. And whichever party is in government then controls the what should be a public broadcaster. It's not a public broadcaster, it's a state broadcaster. It just delivers propaganda. This has always been the case in Malta, but there's always been a handful of independent media that did its best to hold government to account. With all that's happened with COVID and all of that, the pressures that any media organization is facing anywhere in Europe, in Malta, it is more pronounced because we're a small island. We don't have much of a market. The advertising is limited. So now all the independent media is dependent on government advertising. They have now even formed a lobby. They formed a lobby with the political parties to talk about state funding. Now, this is an abomination. It is just crazy because the whole point of independent media is being separate from government. At the Shift, we said from the start, we are not accepting any money from political parties or the government, to the point where we blocked them in terms of Google advertising. We had to do this because on the first day that we launched, the government said, this is the opposition's tool. It wasn't the case at all. But we had to take that stand to say we're absolutely nobody's tool. It's our 7th year. We have survived. And even if we shut down tomorrow, because it is difficult and we don't even know if we're going to be there next month, next year. We don't know. It's very difficult. But at least the Shift would have made a point that there is a different business model that is possible. We have shown and proven that this is possible. And on top of that, more importantly, there is the message. There is the message to the public that they are not alone. People, we have a very loyal readership. That is because they have invested in a news portal, and we have always put them first.
It's pretty amazing to see how people have stepped up over the years. Like I remember when I first started writing columns for you, and I asked some Maltese friends who were in town here for an event, what do they think about the shift? They said, "Oh, it's irrelevant. Nobody reads it." I mean, you can't say that anymore.
No, the last survey by the Broadcasting Authority showed that we are now on a par we've reached the numbers of newsrooms that have been established decades before we have.
Hmm.
And I mean, our marketing strategy was always, we're a niche audience, we are your audience, we are your providers, whatever. So that was always what we marketed, because in Malta, because you have a two-party political system, it is this, there's a section in between those parties, and those are the people who decide an election. We only wanted to target those people. We didn't want the whole broad thing, because they're like football fans. You can't convince those people who are out there, lobbying for their political party. That's all. That's the audience we wanted to attract. But we have gone beyond that. We have sustained that and gone beyond that. And I think that's a massive achievement, because I think we've shown people that it doesn't have to be that way. And now we are focusing our efforts more on media literacy. So because we don't have that, you come up with, you're brought up in your family with the political party you vote for. There is absolutely no education in terms at the schools and at university in terms of civic consciousness. So we're now taking that on. So we are more than a media organization. We are organizing conference, we do education, we're doing, now we're going to start on media literacy. We're doing all these things that in fact the state should be doing, the government should. But because it isn't there, we have to fill that.
In a situation like that, it's not in their best interest to do it, I think. So even teaching things like this that should be common knowledge in schools or civil society are kind of a blow against the corrupt regime. That's really interesting. So you mentioned that I came on your radar I guess it was probably that first guest post I wrote for Daphne that kind of went viral several times. But what made you think that a foreigner like me might be able to contribute something worthwhile to the discussion?
You had a unique perspective on Malta. You lived here for, I think, 8 years. Am I right? 8 years?
Yeah, six, close to seven. Yeah.
And so you knew the country. You had a perspective, and I always believe that we are best diagnosed, so to speak, by people who are here and can help us identify our defects. I love your pen. I've read your book. It's fantastic. I really love it. Thank you for that, and thank you for shedding light on Daphne's murder and what is going on in the country. It is really, really important for us that you did that.
Well, I think it can help sometimes too when you're caught up in a situation, all you can see is what's going on immediately around you, and sometimes that often looks like chaos. But when seen from a bit farther away, and not having been raised, I guess, in that sort of setting, things that seemed normal, in the same way that things that would seem normal to me growing up in small town Canada, seen from outside, look pretty strange, and patterns are evident. I even see that looking back, at my own country after 13 or 14 years abroad. I could see patterns that are very strange to somebody looking from the outside, but also with an insider's eye. So yeah, I can understand. So you and I attended an event at RSF Berlin a couple of years ago, and you said that what happened to Daphne could just as easily happen again. So what's the situation now in that regard?
Nothing has changed. We've been campaigning for 7 years. We've had to move into advocacy journalism. It wasn't a choice because, if we don't defend and lobby for press freedom, then who is? So we've had to change the way that we do journalism. and that is how we managed to get the public inquiry, because the government was resisting it for 2 years. And even when it started, the government was trying to stop it at every step of the way. So unless the public inquiry resulted in a very concrete set of recommendations that, if implemented, would address the problem of the rule of law in Malta. Okay, so the problem with press freedom is obviously connected to the rule of law. And none of this has been implemented. So there is still a lack of political will. The public inquiry found that the state was responsible. And so if nothing has been done, then we are still all vulnerable, because, understand, we are an investigative news portal. Every day we talk about people, powerful people, and we expose the scandals, etc. And every day the names pile up. If the police don't take action on those individuals that we are exposing, if they don't look at the evidence that we are presenting, which is the case, because the first thing you do when you want to compromise the rule of law in a country is compromise all the institutions, the police. So this is just piling up. So nothing has changed, and we are all equally vulnerable.
So some weird noise there. So what keeps you going then, personally?
My love for Daphne.
Yeah, I tell you what kept me going for 4 years of writing weekly columns. Apart from the anger at what they did to Daphne, which just unforgivable, is it was the 2019 protest. Like that was really inspiring. That's something I never thought I'd see. People flooding the streets night after night after night for weeks, banging pots and egging politicians until they drove the prime minister from power. That's amazing. That just shows you how many decent people are living there under their thumb, and who will rise up given the chance.
That moment was really inspiring. It lasted for a few months. 3 of the top members of government had to resign, but then politics happens. So the prime minister we have now was appointed by the disgraced former prime minister Joseph Muscat. There was a deal struck between them that he would not be, charged, not be held accountable for what he did, as long as Robert Abel, our current prime minister, is in government. But there's still one tool that we have. Based on our investigation, an NGO called Republica requested a magisterial inquiry on the hospital's day. It was actually based on 3 ministers. But in the course of proceedings, what we are learning is that the investigation has now shifted onto Joseph Muscat, our former prime minister. And the reason why, like, Joseph Muscat is now saying, he's going to be a candidate for the MEP elections and such. And this is why all this is happening, because there is something there in that magisterial inquiry. We don't quite know what yet, but it's taking its time because it had to shift onto him. So there is still some hope there, and it is causing friction within the Labour Party, because obviously have more information than I do about this. So we have some hope that when this magisterial inquiry is concluded, and it has been going on for years, this is the court system in Malta, but we still have hope that magisterial inquiry will reveal Joseph Muscat's involvement in the corruption that we have been talking about for the last 7 years.
Yeah, really, it's always felt like a situation where if you just pull out that one crucial piece, everything else will come tumbling down because everybody will start turning on each other. Like the kind of code of silence, the linchpin that held that all together is has got to be vulnerable somewhere. I think that's the best chance.
We are also obviously in the situation because the opposition is weak and it's not doing its job. So that's also a problem. So the situation for people in Malta, when you look for when I mean, we deal with, as journalists, we deal with these issues every day. We look at every possible angle, but people don't do that in their daily lives. They have their lives to cope with. The problem that we have is that there is no alternative. There is no alternative. So that is compounding the problem we are facing.
So if you read my book and you were disgusted about Daphne's murder and by the wholesale looting of Malta that we've been talking about today, supporting the shift is a very good way to fight back or hit back at these guys. So, and I can tell you from having been on the inside that donations go directly towards funding these incredible investigations. So how can my readers support the shift?
Thank you, Ryan. Well, the website is theshiftnews.com, and there's a donate button, and there are different options in terms of the monthly value. We really appreciate every single donation, no matter how small, and it really goes in our articles and association, our companies. We have a clause that says everything has to go into investigative journalism. So certainly no single cent is wasted. It goes to investigative journalism and it goes to helping us achieve our mission.
Well, thank you for giving us some insight into that mission and into what it's like to be an investigative journalist under such difficult conditions. I'm sure anyone who read my book will really appreciate this glimpse.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you.